Hi, you guys. So I just wanted to give you a quick introduction to argumentative writing, which we've already started a little bit with your discussions about the lady or the tiger. So when you're thinking about argumentative writing, there are four things that you really kind of have to think about. One of which is really easy, which is the author. You know who that is typically, and you know them as sort of the speaker of the piece. And they usually have some sort of purpose or reason for writing what they're writing. And there are three main purposes in writing, which you probably are familiar with. One, of course, is to inform, where you're just telling people about stuff, things that you read like in your history textbook and stuff like that. Those are just informational texts. There is to persuade, which is sort of what we're looking at with argument, because you're trying to get people to agree with your side and see why the other side is not as strong. And then the last one is to entertain. And those are fictional stories that are meant just to be, fun, and entertainment for you to read. Could be something like really funny, could be something scary if you like horror, but their goal is just to entertain you. It's not to try to get you to see things a certain way, and it's not to inform you about something sort of non fictional and important. It's just for you to have a good time. So when we talk about argument specifically, we're looking at really to persuade. Sometimes there's also obviously the idea of informing in there when you're making an argument, but the goal is to persuade. So that is typically the purpose, which is fairly easy to figure out. And then the audience. So knowing the audience means that we know who the author is trying to write this particular essay or give this speech, to. Who are they trying to convince? Who is this argument directed towards? For example, if you were reading an essay that was about maybe climate change and the author was trying to get the laws changed, then the audience would be obviously like Congress or the Senate or the president. If you were reading an essay about how students need more time to actually do active lessons in class and get up and move around, then your audience would be the teacher, because they're trying to convince teachers what they need to do that's best for students. So once you determine who the author is, why they're writing this, and who they're sending it to, then your goal is to figure out the message, or what we like to call, of course, the thesis. So here is where you're figuring out exactly what they're trying to say, what is the argument they're trying to make, what's the thesis statement, and how are they trying to make it. And it's usually probably near the beginning, like a thesis would be in any essay that you wrote, and you just want to figure out like exactly what their reason is and what they're trying to argue. Later this week, on Wednesday, when I give you the article that you're going to read, you're going to be asked to identify the purpose, which should be pretty easy because the purpose probably is going to be to persuade. But you can narrow it down even more. You could say to persuade whoever to do whatever, if you want to be more specific, who the intended audience is, and then what is the ultimate message. So you're just going to respond with one sentence where you put all three of those things in, or a couple sentences. It's going to be a very short response. We're just going to explain who is the author, what's the purpose, what's the audience, and what is the message. I'm going to give you the article the first time and ask you to identify them. And then the next time we do this, going to ask you to find an argumentative piece. I'll give you some pointers to point you in the right direction. And then you're going to find your own and identify those things. And that is sort of how we start with argumentative writing. When you can identify these few things, then from there, you can kind of build from that and start looking at points and counterpoints, counter arguments, showing both sides of the story, which is also really important in argumentative writing. But we'll talk about that a little bit later.